Hey everybody, I'm Ryan Doyle, this is the Verdigris Table, and today we're mastering a dungeon, Winter's Daughter, and it's more than just a beautiful little adventure by Gavin Norman of Necrotic Gnome. It is the perfect way to get a table of 5e players to engage with the game in a whole new way. We just went over a few ways that's true in this video, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. Instead, in this one, I'm going to walk you through running Winter's Daughter as the Dungeon Master with an eye on what makes it special and different than the typical Dungeons & Dragons 5e work you might be a little more familiar with. And with that in mind, actually, there is one thing worth repeating from last time. There are two versions of Winter's Daughter, one for Old School Essentials and one for D&D 5th edition. I have links down below to both of them, and using those will help support this channel a little bit without any additional cost to you, so thanks for that. But please make sure you pick up the right one. I will say picking up both of them can be a nice little exercise in comparing and contrasting. And out of the gate, if you do that, you're going to notice that the 5e version takes 36 pages to accomplish what the old school version does in only 24. And I think this is pretty instructive. I find a lot of us who came into the hobby during 5th edition are maybe a little reluctant to learn new systems because we assume it's going to take as much effort as learning 5th edition did. But if you start exploring other games, you're going to learn quickly the majority of those games are a much easier lift. On the player's side, but especially on the game master's side. The next thing you're going to notice if you compare these two versions side by side is that the first encounter is wildly different. In the 5e version, we approach the Withing Stones, and there are two Droon performing a ritual sacrifice of a young woman. Now, whether the player characters are level 1, which is what I would probably recommend, or they're level 2, even level 3, maybe 4, these Droon are powerful casters, and one of them alone could probably wipe out the entire party here. And there's two of them. We get a beefy GM's note explaining how 5e players might assume everything that is put in front of them is carefully calibrated for them to just, defeat in combat, when the truth is, this world is much more dynamic and unbalanced. We're not stuck on easy mode, and there's no guarantee that the player characters are the most dangerous things walking around out here. It is important that the players get this message, yes, but it's two dudes about to slit a woman's throat here, and it's probably not going to matter much that she claims that she's into it. She's got these crazy eyes, and maybe she's high out of her mind on some weird, fantasy psychedelic. Maybe she's been magically charmed or something. And if the players see themselves as running remotely good characters, let alone, hero types, they're probably going to throw down here. And half of them are going to get locked up by the hypnotic pattern. Stones are going to start literally falling from the sky, and an immediate TPK is not a great way to convince the folks at your table that this new thing you're asking them to try out is a ton of fun. So I would recommend using the updated encounter from the OSE version, where there is a twitching stag skeleton, and it's coated in green slime. It's glowing. The slime is like evaporating to form this acrid haze, and in the trees, we've got 13 iron owls with pentagrams eyes, and they're rustily, creakily turning their necks around to follow the PC's action as they explore this place. This way, we're setting the tone, and we show the players we're definitely not in Kansas anymore without wiping them out immediately before we've even got the door to this place open. If you do like the Droon encounter, and they are a big and excellent part of Dolmenwood, so I don't blame you, but I would put it in my back pocket and either use it as like a random encounter when the players know a little bit more about how things work here, or if the PCs mess with this weird magical ritual they clearly don't have any business understanding, they disturb that twitching deer skeleton under the watchful gaze of these metallic owls, well, then maybe when they come out of this tomb in a few days' time, guess who's out there performing a new ritual because some jabronis messed up their last one? Consequences. Don't worry, that's really the only change we're going to make here. The rest of our prep is going to be focused on being flexible and allowing the players as much agency as we can. And that starts right away with having 2 ways to enter the burial mound here. Moving the slab is pretty obvious, but pretty difficult. If the players can describe how they can make that easier, maybe they're using tools or magic, improvising other solutions that could help, I would give them a bonus to their rolls, or maybe just lower the DC. We want to establish and reward creativity here early and often, get the players thinking beyond just like pushing the buttons on their character sheet and engaging with the world that lies before them. And if they totally strike out, they can bash their way in here, but that takes time and generates a lot of noise, perhaps triggering one of these random encounters. Now, random encounters are often maligned and misunderstood, but I am on record many times saying good random encounters are great. It actually seems like a lot of people agree with me out there because my outdoor encounter tables keep getting new medals on the DM's Guild. Grasslands just say copper, the hills are silver now, and forest, is very close to electrum. So please check them out if you haven't yet. Link below. The whole thing's available in the sample to download. But if you can support the channel, it's always appreciated. The random encounters in Winter's Daughter are great as well. They are right on theme. They make the world feel a little bit more alive, and they're here to make time matter. Can the PCs take a long rest whenever they want to? Well, they can certainly try, but something might happen if they do. If the party decides to have a look around this mound, they're going to discover another way in as well, with obvious clues to the fact that dangerous things might be lurking within. And whether we encounter them crawling through this hole or down in the priest's quarters later, these worm tongues are nasty. And I don't mean that they're tough, though that persistent acid damage can be actually a little sneaky. I mean, they are 4-foot-long tongues with mouths like lamprey eels, and they are writhing around, literally tasting the air to locate their prey, and they're leaving trails of acidic saliva behind them. So creepy, so good. And these worm tongues are pretty much the only guaranteed encounter of combat we're going to have in here. Unless, of course, somebody's walking into this tomb that isn't lawful, because then the animated objects the Plurintine Church set up to guard this entrance are going to attack. Now, maybe you want to swap out lawful for good. Maybe you want to have them leave neutral creatures well enough alone, depending on how alignment works in your world. But I do really love that Room 5 makes alignment relevant and establishes it very early in the adventure. I also love that each of these objects are doing different things with their attacks, and that we could actually talk our way out of combat here by debating the finer points of religious dogma, or, maybe just lying. And this might be a new concept for a lot of 5e players, so keep these objects talking and create opportunities for the PCs to talk back and maybe solve a problem outside of just hitting things until they drop to 0 HP. If there is a tussle in the entrance hall, or we just spend enough time walking around examining these objects if they didn't animate, I would give the players an indication that there is a colorful tile mosaic thing happening beneath their feet and the accumulated centuries of dust. Again, I would encourage the players to describe how their characters are checking this out if they do decide to do that, not just simply roll a perception check. We did a whole video on why you'd want to take this approach, and getting the players thinking about how they are going about things is going to be key in this adventure. So we want them in deep into this thing as we can, and that's kind of always the goal, or one of the goals of running the game, right? This floor and then the blindfolded statue in room 6 are opportunities to deliver some information and context about what went on in here. And I might ask who has proficiency in what, and distribute different nuggets of knowledge to different characters based on who has like history versus religion versus arcana, insight, whatever. Maybe no role required. We want the players making decisions and informed decisions here. So it is our job to give the characters and the players as much information as is reasonable. We don't want to lore dump until their eyes glaze over, but we want them to know what's going on in here.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Now, I bet they don't go downstairs right away, but it is awesome that they can. And if they do, let them wander into Fairy with little to no idea what they're doing. If they make it to the top of the tower, Princess Snowfall at dusk is going to send them back here to get the ring. Again, it is all about choice. There's a lot of different routes that you can draw through this little dungeon, and a lot of ways this adventure can go, which keeps things interesting and fresh and fun for us running things, and it makes it rewarding to run this one multiple times with different groups. For the purposes of this guide, we're going in room order, which means room 7 is next, where this mirror might ruin somebody's day, or at least put the fear into them that their day is ruined. Because, look, a first level healing spell is enough to unfreeze somebody. It's not like we need greater restoration or something here. Also, carrying a frozen companion out of the dungeon into sunlight, perhaps in the hopes that, like, Musselmeyer, Druge, Frigwort, or whatever wizard sent us on this quest to recover the ring here, that person is capable, or some person is capable, of depetrifying our friend. So we take them outside, and the problem is solved immediately the second we hit daylight. If all else fails, and it looks like one player is about to spend a long chunk of game night not playing, maybe, okay, insert some holy water into the priest's quarters or the chapel to keep things moving and to keep things fun for everybody. But it is okay to let them sweat a little bit. Give them some time to figure things out. Trust the players to figure things out. When they finally work up the nerve to open those double doors into room 8, oh boy, is the crypt a fun room to run. We've got these floating skeletons waltzing around the ceiling, and all they want is for you to join in their reverie. That is, of course, as long as nobody disturbs their children's remains. There are so many different things that can happen in this room. They could fight or befriend the Lady Amaranda and Lord Breakforworth. Someone could be rendered weightless by this slime. And keep in mind, floating is not the same as flying. And it's also possible that somebody slips and falls through this fissure in the floor, plummeting and then gently drifting down into a completely different world. What's going to happen? How are the players going to deal with these situations? I mean, I could tell you what happens in the different groups that I've run through this, but it is way better to wait and see what happens with your group. And I know, if you're the kind of person to watch a prep video like this, that might not be a very satisfying answer to you. But this adventure and this style of play is asking you to relinquish a little bit of control so that you can experience wonder. And I assure you, that is a trade worth making. The chapel is pretty cut and dry. If you're feeling generous, you can have the wind that rises when that candle is lit, like, lift the bottom of that tapestry just enough to reveal a glimpse of the hidden door there, if, they haven't thought to look behind there already. The real secret in room 10 is located beneath the flagstone, so don't feel too bad about, tipping the players off to the room's existence if they need a little nudge. After fighting the worm tongues and getting that locked desk drawer open, they might not even think to search for more in this room. And if they do, they score a pretty big payday and get access to healing. If they don't, it's not a problem. It's just a bonus for doing a good job being curious adventurers. We do kind of need the party to find the priest's quarters so they can learn the name of one of the hounds and get past room 12 later. And it's a little risky always to hide a pivotal element like this, but look what the adventure does to kind of counterbalance that fact. First, there are 2 ways into here. We might even start our exploration of the mound in this secret room. And there is also some symmetry to the location of Cheddar's name being hidden in a similar spot over in room 11. So if the party does discover one and figures out they need 2 names, there's a pretty solid clue of where to look, whichever one they have found first. But before they find that clue in room 11, I bet they are getting their greedy little mitts on these cool weapons first. And ooh, I love this sword, gang. I like my magic items to have a risk-reward dynamic, and having a story behind them, even better. And I mean, have you ever heard of a better name for a fairy giant than Butter for Bones? The main part of your job as the GM is to describe the situation, and a big part of that is telegraphing danger. Is it perfectly safe to steal this beautiful sword from a statue's hand within an ancient tomb?
Meh.
Now, this vivid yellow and purple fuzzy mold covering the mural sounds pretty dangerous if they're paying attention, so don't feel bad if they don't use caution and get a face full of spores in here. It's the player's job to figure out how to clear this. They outnumber you, and half of them are looking for any reason to burn stuff. So they're going to figure this out. Let anything that seems remotely reasonable work, and if it sounds pretty risky, okay, now call for a roll to see if they manage to pull this thing off without getting poisoned. I know I said we wouldn't be changing much, but little point here in room 12, I wouldn't put the inscription on the doors behind an investigation check. I just give the riddle to the players and emphasize these scary-looking hound statues that are chained to the doors. Fighting these dogs will not be fun, and defeating them won't open the doors. So again, telegraph danger. Give them the information, and then sit back and let the players make their choices. And let the dice fall where they may. And look, gang, I ran this one for level 1 characters, and I roll in the open, so I'm not telling you to try anything I haven't done. In fact, if you want to see a post-session debrief with one of my players after this adventure, check out this video on Pittsburgh Pat's channel. There's a whole playlist there, actually, from our Dolmenwood campaign, if you want more. Plus, this is all sorts of awesome nerddom on Pat's channel. Check it out. Once they crack the code and figure out that, of course, the password is this guy's pet's names, it might look like we're entering the final room here. But in fact, I say the adventure is just beginning. If you took my advice from the last video and have given the players different plot hooks, one PC is likely going to want to take this ring back to town for a ridiculous amount of gold, plus all the benefits of being trusted by a wizard, while somebody else is hoping to bring this ring to the literal woman of their dreams. And now that they found him, Sir Chyde is asking the party to do yet something else with this ring and offers all of the loot in his tomb as a reward. I play Sir Chyde as a proper, lawful knight with that lovesick mopiness thrown in, and keep focused on what he wants. Even if they're jerks, he doesn't want to kill these adventurers, tomb robbers. He wants them to go downstairs and carry the ring to the princess. If they defeat Sir Chyde in combat, which I'm going to say is unlikely, he's going to be back tonight wherever they've taken the ring. If they deceive him, he's going to be tagging along in the ethereal plane, and he's going to figure that out pretty quickly as well. Now, I have him fully disappear, so the PCs aren't aware he's around and can discuss their options without feeling like Sir Chyde or a DMPC is there, looking over their shoulders. There's so much advice about what to do as a dungeon master out there, but one thing you don't often hear is do less. This is a great place to sit back, let the players debate what course of action to take going forward, and that's actually peak D&D, and you don't have to swoop in to pick up the pace, drive the action, leave the space open, and let the players fill it. In fact, if it's getting close to the end of game night, I would call it here and let them talk about what's next all week. It's always great to take advantage of an opportunity like that. End on a cliffhanger, especially when it's the players deciding what's going to happen next. And that's going to keep them thinking about the game between sessions like little else can. That moment the first character gains the courage to step through this curtain of floating candles hovering at the bottom of either stairwell and whoosh, disappear in front of the rest of the party instead of stepping into room 14 is also a great dramatic beat to let breathe. As is the point when all the PCs have entered the basement of this dungeon, but actually step blinking into the blinding white and bitterly cold winter wonderland of Phrygia. As their eyes adjust, the characters see an icy white marble tower standing in the center of a frozen lake with a plume of chimney smoke, rising up from the summit, drawing the eye towards that crack in the sky, dripping with that same weird slime that was in the family crypt, and pressing in all around them is a forest that is silent with that heavy accumulation of snow absorbing all the sound, and the only contrast in the white and little bits of green is the array of corpses hanging like weird decorations from the trees over here, covered in strange mosses and fungi. And even if I'm not ending a session here, sometimes I will grab a drink, maybe run to the bathroom, give a few moments for a moment like this to stretch out. And notice I did not mention the obvious way back to the mortal world in my initial description. I like to save that until they look behind them or ask about it. And hey, don't overlook the fact that time may pass at different rates between these two planes while we're gone. And that might have real consequences, especially if, say, the party disturbed the Droon's witch rule, or maybe left a pack animal with most of their gear behind. Now, I think it would be very difficult to notice any difference in the tomb initially. So if the party comes and goes to Fairy multiple times, perhaps because they come here first without the ring, or they just, double check that it's even possible to get back, then I say the effect stacks, and maybe weeks have passed before we get back home. I'll also say, again, don't skip over the random encounters that occur outside this fairy prison, because they are wonderful for setting the scene and showing that this world is alive. Show that white raven bringing a message to like an upper window of the tower. Show guests or supplies arriving. Think about keeping those winter wolves ready if the players are thinking about wandering off into this Fey wood, when we'd rather, well, not railroad them, of course, but, redirect them back towards the heart of this story. Whether it's the caterer arriving in the sleigh pulled by white stags, or Grim, the doorman, when the PCs meet their first goblin, make sure you stress that this ain't your standard 5e Goblin cannon fodder. This is more like Fey, Jim Henson style, weird little dudes in fancy livery. If you have experienced players at the table, I might go so far as to hold back on saying the word goblin, and troll for that matter, and just provide physical descriptions to up the whimsy and the wonder of it all. And that might also stop them from thinking about CR ratings if they can win a fight here, and keep them like negotiating with this dynamic duo at the door when they learn that the PC's names are absolutely not on this guest list. We want them to eat these mushrooms, gang. They're so great. I like letting the players roll that d12 so their character's fate is firmly in their own hands. I just love this encounter so much. I might put Grim and Grimmel Ridge at the door of every magical tavern or Fey gala in my world from here on out. So just enjoy this one, savor it. From there, whether we go into the kitchen or we go upstairs next, try your best to get the same impact out of these frost elves as well. These aren't just people with like nice bone structure and pointy ears. It's not just like a drow with a blue tint. These are immortal denizens of another world. Maybe some of the characters thought these guys were just myths, stories you told children to get them to behave. Now, the adventure says the party guests are kind of ambivalent and subdued, and that will certainly get the party to the top floor faster, but I like the idea that these mercurial fae who've been at this cocktail hour for centuries now might be at least a little bit curious about newcomers, especially if they're mortals. Double especially if, let's say after eating a random mushroom, one of them looks like Cousin It or has headlight eyes or eyes in the palms of their hands. Maybe one of these decadent nobles flounces over from the oh so tempting buffet to say, "Oh, you must be from the groom's side, yes? Fascinating, fascinating. I've always been curious about the mortal world. Perhaps you could show me the way you got here." Introduce the potential for a lowly level 1 character to accidentally open the door for like an alien invasion by the evil legions of the conquering Cold Prince? Why not? Yes, please. But you do you. I really don't think there's going to be a fight in here, and if there is, the PCs are likely outclassed and they're definitely outnumbered. So I might have them, wake up with Princess Snowfall at dusk later asking them questions. Or, they all die and are tied to trees outside to feed the trolls' fungus garden, and that's how our story ends. If we do reach the top floor, and I bet we will, a 5e mindset would have us expecting a final climactic battle here, right? And that is a possibility. Princess Snowfall at dusk does have a stat block. An icicle dagger for when her magic runs out, plus some guards downstairs ready to come running to her aid. But I bet everybody at the table by now is thinking much more creatively and have a wide open mind when we get the chance to describe this otherworldly beauty, this regal ice princess, and present the players with a series of important choices. Do they give her this ring? Or do they take it to the wizard, right? Who's paying very well for it? If they do give her the ring, what do they do with a wish spell? The epilogue does a pretty good job of laying out some of the possible consequences of the aftermath, depending on what they choose, but ultimately, we don't know what's going to happen here, and that makes this fun for you, the game master, as well as the players. I am excited for you to explore this one at your table, and please come back and tell us how it goes in the comments. Other dungeon masters might find your experience and advice helpful, so please share. I am definitely not the only one with good ideas here in this community. Thank you so much for sharing and for watching this one through. We will be talking more about Dolmenwood soon. Maybe check out one of these videos in the meantime. Until then, be kind and have fun.